Hello and welcome to part 3, the restoration of this free sewing machine. At the end of this video there are 2 bonus clips. One is about this tray and sort of the way I use these trays, and the other is a little tour of my sewing lab. I made both of the clips just in the course of making this video, and then I decided not to include them. Or at least to include them at the end. That way you can make the choice. You can decide if you want to see them. If you don't want to see them, just stop the video when the part that you like is over. So here I'm just loading these things in the tray. And when I'm all done, I want to make sure I didn't forget anything. So, one technique that I use to make sure things pop out on a surface is I hold the light low at a low angle. And you can see right here I actually did pick up the needle. I had forgotten the needle in there. Not that that matters, but you don't want to forget anything. This is a great way to find little tiny parts that you've dropped on the floor. Here we have your all-purpose, multi-purpose stainless steel bowl into which all the parts will go. And I'm just going to cover them with a 70% isopropyl rubbing alcohol. You can get 90%. This just happens to be what they had when I went for it last time. They just happen to have 70%. This is an old sign painter's trick. You start with the least aggressive chemical and then work your way up. If the rubbing alcohol doesn't work, I can always step up to a denatured alcohol, which is a little stronger, maybe then an acetone. If I go right for MEK, I've got my hands in that stuff all the time, and it just gets worrisome, as far as being exposed to those solvents all the time. The little pot up there is just a glue pot. Whenever I make small items, I always ship them out in a little handmade gift box. And when you make those little gift boxes, there's lots of glue ups. So I just use that. It's like a perfect little lid for that bowl. Here's that foot, that mystery foot. When I made the last video, I didn't realize I would be fast forwarding it until I was all finished, and it was an hour and 40 minutes of content, which, I certainly will put out full-length videos if people want them with running commentary, but it just seemed a little excessive to me. So I wanted to show that foot off again. If anybody knows what that foot is, leave a comment, because I really don't. Plates are very rusted, very worn. They're not going to be shiny. But okay, so I'm at this is like a little inspection center in the shop here. I have various microscopes and little testers and things in this corner, and I have this heavy-duty vise here that a friend has given me some years ago. I'm going to try to put this so that's well in frame, and all this is. It's just a chunk of plywood with a cleat screwed into it, and I just simply hold that in the vise, and what it does sort of transforms this vise now into a work center that I can rotate. I can get different angles on it, I can pivot, I can hold other things, but most importantly I can take something like a hand saw or a thing, a strip of steel or something, and clamp it down to that and then work it. These are a little small to clamp down. This one I probably could get away with running one half and then turning it around, or however we wanted to do that. And here I'm just trying to get a scope of what, get a scope of what this is all going to entail. And here you can see this little guy is riveted in there, so to really do a proper restoration, that's going to have to come out and then be re-riveted. So that's going to be for a later date. I'm just going to clean it up for now as quick as I can. Like I said, my goal is to get this thing to stitch. I don't want to go putting a lot of time if it can't stitch for some reason, which I kind of doubt. But just out of principle, I want to make sure it's going to stitch before I go putting a ton of time into it. I didn't even think to check the needle plate. It's greasy, so it's up there soaking anyway, and I'm sure a lot of those pieces are going to have to come back down here. I just figured while that stuff was soaking, I could go ahead and spend some time paying attention to this. I'm going to go and grab a little tool, and I'll be right back. I'll show you what I got. All right, I said tool. It's really more of a fixture. This is a magnetic chuck. It has a hex key just fitted into a little bolt over here, and what it does is you can put, you know, your steel, your iron parts on there, and then when you tighten the chuck down, it raises up a magnet and fixes those in place. Pretty handy little guy. We'll see. I don't know how much of this it'll work for. It's gonna work on this one, but I don't know how much it's gonna work on all of them because they're yeah, they got little frobs and bumps and stuff. This really works best on flat plates. All right, so the move here is just to apply a little oil and then rub them a little bit with the steel wool. Pretty simple. I make up little sticks. Here's one coming into the frame pretty quickly here. I think, there it is. These little guys, I just make them up into all different shapes and sizes. This one in particular is for the hollow grinds of a particular knife that I make, and I can buff up those hollow grinds. So it has a little scoop to it, but it's a great way to apply a little more leverage and a little, you know, you get a little steadier hand. You just kind of put your stuff down there, and then a little easier than just using your fingers. There's a little scratch mark you can see from the shuttle scraping there. I'm guessing the lint, you know, buildup caused it to push up and scratch on that plate. The 27 has that mark as well, so I don't know how common it is. Maybe some of you more experienced treadlers can weigh in on that if that's a common occurrence. I have to say, you know, without rechroming or replating in nickel, you're not really going to get the shine back. That dark gray that you see, the black marks, that's the iron underneath, the underlying iron where the plating's been worn off. And that's not going to shine up really any better than that. But I have to say I like the look. I don't know that I'm going to refinish them. I might just leave them as is. All right, so here's that faceplate, and I'm just clamping it on with this vice grip. I don't abuse my tools. You know, I try to take care of them, and I do have, but I have thousands of tools. So the more I can use something, the better. You know, I just don't. I can't go and buy all kinds of clamps. You know, so I just take a rough clamp like that, and then you can see I just cut the thumb out of an old glove, an old worn out glove, and I just tie it on there with a piece of string. And it works fine, keeps it from marring nice surfaces. And then if I'm just clamping something rough, I obviously take all that off. You know, I put that on just for this job. I'll just take it off. The string I keep on the bench for measuring compound curves or funny, you know, things you can't just put a ruler on. Maybe they're curved all over the place, or they have crazy angles or something. You just run the string along and then measure what you know how far you ran it. Someone had mentioned, I don't want to call anybody out. If it's you can call yourself out in the comments if you like. But someone had mentioned vis-a-vis that funny foot, that perhaps this machine was used by someone making heavier items, you know, upholstery and things like that. And the deeper I get into this, the more I look at it. They might be right. This machine was used hard, and you know they wore the plating off of several parts of this. Even the thread, where the thread went by that little loop, you can see it wore in through the plating. I got all done, ready to go back to the shop, and this is what was happening. It doesn't look like it's going to last too long. Well, I figured as long as it's raining, I may as well go into the blacksmith shop and buff these things up a little bit. This is my old knife grinder buffer, and I thought, you know, why not? Can't hurt if I'm going to leave them the way they are instead of refinishing them in bronze. It can't hurt. And even if I do refinish them in bronze, it still can't hurt. Of course, you can see the sun streaming in. That was just one of those little summer storms that come and go in the blink of an eye. All the rain had stopped before I even got the camera set up back here. But I'm stubborn, so I just went ahead and buffed them anyway. Then I just wipe them down with denatured alcohol. Would use rubbing alcohol, but I was all out here in the shop, so I just stepped it up to the next level. Doesn't really take much. Just cut the wax. You know, the grit in that rouge is embedded in a wax. And here I knew I was going to go 4 times faster, so I waved really slowly. Still can't quite make it back to the other shop. My neighbor across the street is moved in this spring and planted a big flower garden, and now she's selling flowers. Can't beat that. It is literally right across the street from the shop. All right, I finally did make it back up the street, and now I'm in the sewing lab, just opening windows, turning on lights, getting it nice and bright in here, getting ready to clean these parts up. This is just straightforward, just a scrubbing and a rubbing parts. You can see here, I'm going to hold this up in a second. You can see the difference between just soaked and unsoaked. Not really rubbing that thing too much, but from one side to the other, it's a lot cleaner. The rust is going to leave pits. That's just going to happen. All of these parts are going to be a little bit pitted. If they're critical, I'll find replacements or remake them. If they're not, if the rust doesn't affect it, its performance, I'm just going to leave it. And when I get all done, if I decide to redo the color of the machine, then I can make a decision here. Sometimes on these parts like this that are rusted, you can remove, 3 to 5 thousandths without affecting the tolerance, depending on the part and where it fits into the machine. So if I really wanted to go crazy, I could, but in any case, I'm not going to go for a new look. Just want it operable. Well, I did the voiceover for this clip, and it was all out of sync. I went to check it when I posted the last video online. I went to check it out, and I noticed that a lot of the clips were out of sync with the audio. So that's probably just the free app that I'm using. I'll do the best I can. I'm not sure, how to really make sure that that's going to be all synced up unless I start paying for a film editor. And that's just not a step I'm ready to take yet. This is that shuttle carrier, and here I took it apart. And when I took it apart, I thought, it can only go back together one way. Then I put it back together, and I thought, I've put this back together the wrong way. So I took it back apart here, whereupon I discovered, no, it can only go back together one way. So I put it back together the same way, and I'm just checking the shuttle in it. I'll have to wait till I get it back in the machine. I can see that all the little notches and everything line up, but I will have to wait and see. My sister came to visit yesterday. She brought my niece and my nephew. And my niece is 12 years old. And she doesn't have a dedicated art center, a bench, a work area. So she wanted an art desk for her room. So I had this little 3-drawer desk with a fold-down leaf. Made up some parts for it, cleaned it up, and we made a tilt-top drawing board that she can put on there or remove as she sees fit, so she can draw, paint, have a big desk, small desk, use it for Sculpey, sewing projects, jewelry, all the little stuff that she does. And I visited with them. We had a meal. I went to bed. Got up this morning, and I have no knowledge whatsoever of any of these parts. It's amazing to me that a mere 24 hours, just a little visit with family, and I have completely forgotten how any of this works or where it went when I took it apart. I get to this point in almost every project, a point where I realize that I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm completely in over my head. And I've just gotten comfortable with that. I've just come to realize that that's a part of the process. Some things I do over and over. Some of the things I produce, obviously, I kind of know what I'm doing. But with this kind of thing, this sort of project, a lot of times you end up lost. But this thing is fairly simple. I'm sure I can get it back together. Here I'm just scrubbing up the feed dog mechanism, and there's a moment, if you're sharp-eyed, where you can see my heart stops and my soul just leaves my body briefly. Right there. When I peek under my hand like that, this thing snapped, and I was convinced that I had broken it in two. I'm not applying a great deal of pressure, but occasionally with high carbon steels and these old brittle things, they can just snap. Turns out I didn't hurt anything. It's actually two-piece. The feed dogs are set in that bar, and they just sit in a little milled pocket. And they had become so glued in with polymerized oil that they finally let go. I'm working on this black granite surface, so it made kind of a loud snap, but everything was okay. So here, this is the needle plate, and I'm a little suspicious. The teeth are burred over, and I'm wondering if I'm going to have to chase them or file them, back out, but they seem fine. So here, I think, starting to come to the end. My hands are always cut up. They're always, chunks out of them and little cuts and dings and knocks. So the first few minutes in these alcohol baths are always kind of fun. But after a while, the stinging stops. I figure it must be good for cleaning everything out. So here I'm stoning the thread cutter. This is actually the part that got clipped that I wanted to make sure it just wasn't synced up, and it was weird because it was telling you that was the thread tensioner. But that's that little thread cutter, and I just wanted to show you you have to stone the edge, has to be clean. You can't have any pitting on that edge, and you could just see a couple millimeters, 2 or 3 millimeters that were clean. Can't have pitting right on the edge. All right, so there are all the parts knolled up in the tray. You're going to see me point some things out here. Some screws that I'm not quite sure where they go, and I'm sort of discussing some things. It's way past my bedtime, and I've uploaded this now twice to YouTube. Both times it had no sound, and I just keep plugging away here. I'm not very good at this, and I just keep trying this video making. And what happened was, somehow within the Filmora app, several of the clips got linked together in their control. And so this clip had original commentary that I wanted to keep, I turned the voiceover volume down, and it automatically turned the voiceover volume down on several of the other clips. Not all of them, but a few. I'm not sure how they got linked up. I don't know really what's going on. But I want to make sure you guys get, at least a video with some rudimentary audio here. In the future, what I'll likely do is just record live and then intersperse that with clips that are sped up. In any case, there's the parts. There's the flowers. You can't hear it, but it's raining again outside. So I'm getting ready to go grab all of the parts for the free sewing machine. And first I want to do a little shameless product plug. So this is a tray trivet. I don't really have a good name for it, but I just call it a tray trivet. These are available in my Etsy shop both as upcycled and as new products. I make the trays out of zinc or tin, or upcycle them from these old photo trays. And they were inspired by a trip to Taiwan with my wife. We went and I saw tea making in the Lao Rei Chen style, which is the old man's tea, where they prepare tea on sometimes an elaborate table, sometimes a simple table, but all of the tables had the one thing they all had in common was that the hot liquid, the water, the tea, whatever was poured over the cups and used to brew, would flow into the table and then down through a tube into a bucket. And when I got home, I thought, what is the quickest way I could do that without building a whole elaborate table? And I came up with this tray trivet. So here you can brew your tea, you can pour your tea out of the teapot into the service piece, and then you have your cups. You can pour hot water over the cups. You can serve into the cups, and all of the mess stays right there in the tray, which is pretty good. And then we had one tray sitting around, and we realized you could put fruit, apples, bananas, whatever on there, and it allowed air circulation. You could ripen fruit, and it made it kind of neat. So you can do that. You can, if you're washing a few dishes, you can set things on there to dry. These spoons I also make, and these are available in my Etsy store as well if you have an interest in pewter spoons. But then, as I got just living with these things more and more, I realized how neat they were. You can separate the two. So now you've got a trivet so that when you pull your hot casserole out, you've got a place for to put hot dishes and things like that. And what you also end up with is a tray. And so these trays come in really handy, just moving things around from building to building, shop to shop, and so on. So just wanted to take a moment and plug that. Now we'll get to work. Okay, so we're in the main workroom of my sewing lab here. This is where I do most of my hand sewing and experimental type stuff, as well as a lot of leather work. Leather work is the sort of the most recent addition to my shop, so it's not as set up as other areas of the shop, and it's very difficult to photograph. It's not very photogenic because I have light from those two windows that kind of makes everything glare. So you can see I have all my stuff kind of in kits. I don't really have it too well set up. I have a little press there. This thing is fantastic. This is a little, it's an antique cobbler's tool. It really is for shoes. You can see kind of the footprint, but it gives you those three work surfaces. And in an upcoming video, I'm going to be showing a remake of this. I'm going to redesign this for more modern use, for just to keep on your bench and have as a handy tool. It's kind of interesting, I think. But let me get all set up and I'll show you what I'm doing here.